Committee back to order. We have with us the CIO of the town of Sackville. She had a little hometown moment there. Mr. Jamie Burke. Welcome this afternoon. It's nice to see you. Our process is you'll have 20 minutes to make a presentation, followed by 40 minutes of questions. So the floor is now yours.
Great. Hello, everyone, and it's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Jamie Burke. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer here at the Town of Sackville, and I'm calling in today from the territory of the Mi'kmaq and the unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So I'm an urban planner by trade, just so you know a little bit about my background. So I'm an urban planner turned town manager. So the climate change topic is something obviously near and dear to me, not just in my current profession, but in my professional planning career as well. And I have a 17-year career in the public sector. And as of December, I've recently been the president of the New Brunswick Association of Planners, which represents the almost 70 professional planners across the province of New Brunswick. So if I can get you to skip to slide 2, that would be great. I know you have the slide deck in front of you, so if you will follow along here as we go. So I guess the outline for today is I'm going to provide a little bit of background on the Sackville context, and then I'll move along to major issues and actions and other projects, and then wrap up on areas where I think we can collaborate. So you'll see on slide 3, which is really about our reality here in Sackville. I guess we recognize our geography, that we are a low-lying coastal area that's susceptible to the impacts of climate change. So everyone knows that. We're protected by dikes. We have about 7.4 kilometers within our town limits, and about 16.5 kilometers outside of our town limits. I heard you make reference in the presentation before about the Seknato Isthmus, so it's well known. We are a major corridor for transportation, traffic, as well as rail, in addition to electricity, and this is national critical infrastructure passing through our own community. Freshwater flooding is happening now. I'm going to talk a bit about that during the presentation and focus on one project, and 24% of our town is within a floodplain. So I think that's also important to keep in mind. And that's freshwater flooding, then saltwater flooding is obviously imminent when you're protected by a diking system. We tend to have a bit of a microclimate here, especially on the marsh, where we've seen as recently as last Friday, Trans-Canada highway closures. And we've identified climate change as a priority and actions, and we're working on them, and we're going to touch on some of that as we move along in the presentation. So I can get you to move to the next slide, please. You'll see the word value across the screen. And I guess I really wanted to start the presentation by recognizing that we need the province to be on board with a climate change plan, as the challenges intersect so many areas of our lives. And in my case here in Sackville, different departments, governments, and even provinces. So the challenges and the necessary solutions to address them are far-reaching, complex, and we all know they're extremely expensive. So although we're geographically unique here in Sackville, the changing climate isn't. So I see great value and applaud the province for pursuing adaptation efforts in order to build resilience to the impacts of climate change. We need a plan of action, because without one, we're chasing our tails. From one project to another, little or large, without an overall vision or strategy. So as a municipality, we need the province to lead the way. And I'm very excited to be here. Just think of data collection as just one critical area. We need it because we as a municipality, a small one like Sackville, 5,300 people, we don't have that expertise in-house. So we're relying on others to give us that power of knowledge so that we can make informed and better decisions. And it's not unusual. I mean, we in the municipal world, we deliver services to property for the most part. We provide water, sewer, snow plowing, garbage, and recreation and bylaw enforcement services. So having access to data allows us to make better decisions. So I'm going to spend some time providing you all with some context on the impacts and challenges that Sackville is facing and some of the adaptation measures that we've pursued over the years. So next slide, please. So you can see our corporate climate change adaptation plan, which focuses on us specifically as a municipality, but also our integrated community sustainability plan, which dates back to 2010, believe it or not. So we were ahead of the curve with respect to planning for climate change, and these things help us stay on track. The difficult part for us has been finding the time and the financial resources as well as personnel resources, to update them. It is truly a challenge to find the time and resources to do this, but we've tried to be practical and we've tried to be realistic and focus on things that we can accomplish. And I think that's a really important point to make with respect to climate change planning. Next slide, please. So one success story from our neck of the woods is the Seknato Climate Change Collaborative. So it's no secret that collaboration is key in helping to help mitigate and adapt to climate change. And this is a big success story for us. The name says it all, as you can see from the logos on the screen. This is truly a collaborative amongst a variety of groups and organizations. But what the name doesn't say is who started this group. And it'd be a failure of me not to mention EcoEnergy, which is our heavy-hitting nonprofit organization, which I'm going to talk a bit about here briefly. So the mandate of the collaborative is really to raise public awareness. The group has a mandate to provide training events across the region, and those have included anything from reducing flood risk, how nature can help us adapt to climate change, preparing for flooding in the region, but also recent presentations to the high school. And this is one area that I wanted to touch on specifically. When we spoke to students, it was extremely valuable. We saw the anxiety and questions, I guess, that the student body has with respect to climate change. And talking to them, just letting them know what's been done really helps put the climate portfolio into perspective for them, as it's easy to get lost and scared when thinking about climate change. It really does need to be integrated into the school curriculum, in my opinion. So as your plan suggests, finding ways to partner and collaborate are key, including those with the Department of Education. So I would encourage you to take that piece away. The other thing the group has made a promise to do, I guess, is invite local speakers from Mount Allison University or the Southeast Regional Service Commission who have particular expertise in mapping, and talk about it and share it, and not to hide it or keep it to ourselves. And then certainly in terms of EcoEnergy, every community should have one of these groups. They truly are remarkable. They themselves have organized and promoted anything from bulk 72-hour emergency kit purchases to helping people flood-proof their homes, hosting draft-proofing parties with pizza, and building rain gardens in the community. The list goes on and on. I'm happy to share those with a subsequent submission. They've really embraced greenhouse gas reduction, energy efficiency, and renewable energy in an effort to build resilience. And they've even done things that teaches people how to preserve and can their own food. Things that we tend to not think may be important, but to some people it really is. So they have been responsible for all the community sustainability plans in our region, including our own. And I think it just goes to highlight some of the incredible and important work that's taking place in our corner of southeastern New Brunswick. If you can move to slide 6, please, you'll see a map of the Seknato Isthmus. I'm delighted to hear you others speaking about this. This is an essential part of our discussions in terms of climate change preparation. It's no secret we're one of the bookends of the isthmus, so I need to give Mr. Hoyt and Mr. Capozzi and the team at the Secretariat a shout to say thank you for raising the awareness of this area of the province. We know it's $20 million a day, $50 million a day, $20 billion annually in goods that are moving through the community, and having this flooded is going to have a major financial impacts for the rest of the country and beyond. And we just have to look to our friends on the West Coast in British Columbia and what happens when, Mother Nature shows how relentless and cruel she can be. So we're looking forward to that report being completed. It's our understanding it is now done and submitted, and we certainly look forward to being privy to those solutions and discussing next steps. The next slide simply shows one of the evenings that we rented the Vogue Theatre to talk about emergency preparedness with our community, where we invited folks from Cumberland DMO across the border to share experiences to help people be more prepared in the event of a major emergency. So slide 8 is a transitional slide. I'm really going to try and drill down on some of the local projects here in Sackville. And you can skip on to the next one if you can. So you can just kind of flip through the next few slides. That would be great. They're just showing some photographs of some of the flooding here in Sackville dating back to the 1960s. And the image that you see now on the screen is, I think we most hopefully know what an abuto is. So this kind of protects us from salt water coming in and inundating what used to be pastures and fields, and now it's residents' homes and entire communities. So when the salt water is in, it pushes the gate closed of the Adaptation, so it can't come in and penetrate the community. And then when the tide goes out, the head of the pressure allows the fresh water that's captured behind the dike to get out to sea. So this is old engineering that we still rely on to this day. So next slide, please. So we have been experiencing flooding in the community regularly over the years. And the tipping point for us was when the CN rail line flooded. CN dispatched a crew to walk in front of the locomotive to ensure that it could get out of the community safely without any obstructions. And that was really the tipping point, which is what the teeter-totter represents. It really pushed us against the wall to do something and work collaboratively on what we were going to do to solve the problem. Next slide, please. So the solution for us was, you'll see on the next slide, which is literally just storage. So you think of a bucket or a bathtub. We needed somewhere to store water rather than people's basements, our public streets, and on our sports fields. You can flip to the next slide, please. So this is the overall plan that we've developed in terms of managing our stormwater here in Sackville. Phase 1 represents the red kind of blob that you see in the middle, which is a stormwater retention pond, and I'll talk a little bit about that briefly. And then you can see kind of the subsequent phases, and I'll let you go through that on your own, but that really shows our overall plan to manage stormwater in the lowest part of our drainage basin here in Sackville. That red dot represents 40,000 cubic meters of storage. That phase is now completed, which I'll share some slides with you here in a second, but we need 100,000 cubic meters, just to put things into perspective. So we're only a fraction of the way there, with many, many more millions of dollars left to spend to put ourselves in a position of resiliency. So next slide, please. So this is what we endeavored to do, which was to create a state-of-the-art naturalized stormwater retention pond. This was deliberate. We didn't want to just dig a hole in the ground to store water. We wanted to provide combine an engineering asset with a recreational asset, and that's exactly what we did. It was different. It was different for the community. It was the first time that we've endeavored to do something like this. So anytime you try something new, it comes with challenges. So there was an educational component to our residents and our councils and some of our own staff, and also with regulators. You're building a naturalized system. It's hard for people to wrap their heads around that it's still man-made, but it's not concrete. We're using natural vegetation, and the idea is to attract wildlife and create an ecosystem. So next slide, please. So you can, again, these are just photographs of the entire project. Again, you can just skip through some of these. So it was winter construction. Winter construction comes with a variety of problems, including frozen ground. So even when you get a slightest little bit of rain, it floods. And you can see some of the final product here in the next few images, where it's really turned into an amazing asset for the community. We have time-lapse cameras still installed on this project. So we're capturing the vegetative growth, which is graciously funded through the BRACE program through Natural Resources Canada and the province of New Brunswick. And when that's completed, we'll be sharing that information so other communities can see just what this turns out to be after a 5-year period. So we also installed some interpretive panels. We wanted to tell people about the stormwater story. We have 3 panels, one in English, French, and one in Mi'kmaq. So we've really looked to take a traditional engineering project and turn it on its head and help people understand what we're trying to do and why, which is really, really important. Next slide, please. And you can see this is now a fixture in our community. It's level, it's safe. It's almost a 1 kilometer walking loop around the perimeter of the pond, and it's very popular with everyone in the community, including seniors. So we also wanted to make it accessible. Next slide. So we've taken it a step further. We put out a call for public art, and we wanted the public art to be specific to raising awareness of climate change. So you can see the piece that's installed now, which is called the Seknato Balance, and it was designed and manufactured by Slipper Lou Design out in Vancouver, who are also the artists for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Ottawa. So it tells the story, and on the next slide, you'll see that we've then taken it from the sculpture itself to telling about why the climate is important here in Sackville and why the Seknato region is vulnerable to climate change. So that panel that you see is also installed, and you can see the total exhibition here in the next exhibit here in the next slide. Thank you. So we just advance the slides again, please. And then lastly, just to wrap up on our stormwater retention pond, we unfortunately do have an industrial use on one side, so we have separated that with a fence, but lo and behold, the creative students at Marshview Middle School have used that space for an exhibition space to talk a bit about the wildlife within the retention pond, and I think we've captured that on the next slide with a red-winged blackbird and a kind of a middle school student depiction of what the retention pond means to them. So it's really become a multi-use space for everyone here in the community. Next slide, please. So what's next for us? We obviously we can't just stop there. You can advance the next slide. You'll see some dollar bills, of course. This is what's next is another $5.5 million phase of this particular project. So phase 3 is you'll see on the next slide follows the blue line, and this will allow another retention pond in addition to, you'll see the green dot on the left-hand side of the image, which is the Mount Allison Old Pickard Quarry. They will then become 2 additional stormwater ponds, followed by a new drainage ditch out to the Bay of Fundy by our sewage lagoons, to an abattoir, which in the next slide you can see isn't quite big enough to accommodate the water that we need to allow that fresh water to get out to sea. So while we can do what we can to manage stormwater within our community, we don't own the infrastructure in or underneath those dikes. So we're relying on the province to upsize that abattoir to be able to get the water that we need out to the Bay of Fundy and complete the project overall. So next slide, please. So in addition, you move to the slide 36, you'll see that's not all, of course. What I've just shared with you is about $14.5 million worth of work just for one climate change related problem. This is the intersection of the 935-106 on the heading to Dorchester, which is also susceptible to flooding because of the size of the culverts under our highway, designated highway, but also the CN rail line. So still more work to be done. And then as you'll see on slide 37, we haven't even talked about sea level rise and the state of the dikes. So I guess what we're looking to do is whatever we can within our own kind of a municipal business to help with flooding. And if you'll see on slide 38, one of our next major projects is upgrading our sewage lagoons. We understand they need major upgrades. They are right next to the Bay of Fundy. We know what sea level rise and coastal erosion and things of that nature will do to sewage lagoons. So we're talking a multi-million-dollar, double-digit million-dollar project to upgrade our sewage lagoons, and we're putting ourselves in a financial position to be able to move the chains on that once phase 3 is done through our water and sewer rates. So if you can advance to slide 40, please. So I guess all of this to say is that I really want to stress how expensive some of these projects can be for municipalities, and without provincial and federal help, it's not practical for us to be able to properly adapt to climate change. It's just not realistic to undertake these types of projects on in Sackville, we have a $12 million operational budget, a $1.2 million annual capital program. We just can't do it. So I'd encourage you as part of your future climate change plans and revisions to continue to fund those municipal projects. That can't be stressed enough. Slide 40 is really a transitional slide to show where I'd like to shift gears here briefly and talk a little bit about the policy side of things, where our world changed back when the climate strike events took place. And this is the photo I took out of our window of council chambers of the mass of students coming down our main street to land on our doorstep. And this was a turning point for us, where hundreds of students showed up demanding action. So our backs were really against the wall. Our councilors' backs were against the wall. So part of their request was more action, but part of it was also a realization for us that we needed to do a better job telling people what we were doing to mitigate and adapt to climate change and what we had accomplished. So one thing that that we did in response to the students showing up is that we created a mayor's roundtable on climate change. I believe it's the first of its kind in certainly in New Brunswick, if not in Canada. This was an ad hoc group of about 26 professionals from academia, government, consultants, etc. And they started advising the town on climate change related issues. And one example is they reviewed the town's capital budget program and provided input on ways to make it more sustainable and climate resilient. I believe that's the first of its kind, so something we're really proud of. They also held a public forum, and out of the public forum, we had a variety of suggestions on things the town should do, one of which was hiring a climate change coordinator, which we've now done through the help of the Environmental Trust Fund program. So Kirsty Masrick is our climate change coordinator, and she's going to be with us for hopefully a 2-year pilot project. So the ETF got that off the ground, but it's expensive, but we're hoping it'll show the financial, social, and environmental benefits from having that staff person on board. One of the other things that we did was we implemented a new counselor training program. So all of the incoming council, including those returning, went through climate change training as part of their orientation schedule to be a municipal counselor. So the slide that you see is just some of the signs and things that the students and people had made on their way to town hall. And then slide 42, it just shows our state-of-the-art town hall building. We realized that we weren't telling enough of the story about our own facility, a LEED building, geothermal heating, sensory lighting, the list goes on, including a green roof, which is what I wanted to share with you all today. So the next slide shows a recent drone image of the roof. You can see this was yet another project spearheaded by EcoEnergy. They secured money through the Environment and Climate Change Canada's Eco Action Community Fund, along with the funding through the Small Change Fund. So it has an emphasis on native species, including flowers and grasses, along with edible plants such as berries and herbs. So we're really proud to have that on our town hall facility. It's a public space, and we recently put up signage encouraging people to visit the roof of town hall, which before this really was unknown to a lot of people in our community. Slide 45 is just to indicate that there's lots of other things for us. There's just a few other shots of the green roof. Slide 45 is literally just a primer for me to, as a reminder, to talk about some of the other things that we're doing here in Sackville: a natural asset inventory, strategic fleet upgrades, exploring how to integrate climate change into our tendering process, exploring an e-bike program, just embarking on a major revision to our municipal plan and zoning bylaw, where we're going to be looking to integrate the most recent data to protect our community from the impacts of flooding. So in summary, from Sackville's perspective, the big ticket items on slide 46 are, there's still so much to do and only so much money to go around. So those are the projects that we're really struggling to get accomplished as we look to adapt to climate change. So the Lawrence Street Phase 3 is obviously first and foremost, but the abattoir replacements and maintenance, long-term maintenance and an overall rehabilitation strategy, influence with the federal government, CN, including the province of Nova Scotia, sewage lagoon upgrades, continued work on highway closures. I'll close with that briefly. And provincial leadership and support is key. So just to wrap things up, from a municipal perspective, I guess we felt it would be important to close on focusing on the province's climate change plan and areas, at least from a municipal perspective, that we think the focus area should be. And you'll see those listed briefly in slide 48. Thank you. So the reference to the importance of information and data sharing, I point to the Seknato Isthmus study. This is going to have significant impacts on our region, including our community. So we're anxious to see that and be a part of that. And we hope we're, as one of the bookends, we're not left out of that important study. Capacity building, certainly the new local governments created under local governments reform and the expanded boundaries is going to change things. So this will raise the importance of having climate change coordinators, and it will certainly create additional work for them. in addition to continuing to support community adaptation planning. The province's reference to interjurisdictional partnerships and collaboration. There's certainly opportunity for improvement here. And I point most recently to the storm last Friday. The Trans-Canada Highway was apparently closed. No one called, no one told us. Our fire chief didn't know about it. So these are low-hanging fruit that are essential for first responders and communities to know about. Infrastructure investments, I think that's, everyone understands the importance of making dollars available given the price tag associated with some of this work. Clean energy and removing some of the barriers to produce more clean energy. So the ability to generate power and sell it back to the grid. I think that's certainly something we're hearing from residents, including our nonprofit group EOS. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, it's noted in the plan. For us specifically, we're trying to install electric vehicle charging stations. We're looking to put in, as part of our 2022 budget, one of the superchargers, and it comes with a $100,000 price tag. So we with a $1.2 million capital program, we can't just roll this out and put 10 or 15 chargers in. It's an incremental approach that we feel really needs to be assisted with additional funding. And then lastly, to wrap up, the climate resilient infrastructure, I think the abatos are certainly something that we need to pay attention to, including the overall isthmus, which I've talked about earlier. And I feel we really need to capitalize on the expertise and resources that are around us. I know, certainly here with Mount Allison University, we're lucky to have them, but also the resources at the Southeast Regional Service Commission. I know that many of them have very well-trained GIS technicians and scientists who can help communities prepare and adapt to the impacts of climate change. So slide 49 is just, I guess it was the most recent example. This photo of the police truck was taken by our former Staff Sergeant Jamie Graves in the height of one of the storms. And you can see as a result of some of the collaborative work we've done with our neighbors across the border, the province has installed infrastructure to close the highway. But I guess what we're asking and what we're promoting is that we have an organized, comprehensive, standard operating procedure on who makes the call to close the highway, who tells who, so that we can ensure that some of our emergency first responders are safe, and that communities can prepare for the influx of traffic that may be diverted off the highway. So the most recent example, certainly from the storms and with more snow along the way. And then in closing, I guess we always try to finish on something positive. There's just so many opportunities here for not just for Sackville, but for New Brunswick in general. The challenges that are in front of us come with large opportunities that have, certainly environmental, social, and economic benefits that we really need to capitalize on. I'm pleased that the province is looking to revise their climate change plan, and it's really been a pleasure to be here. And then lastly, I'd like to thank Jeff Holt and Robert Capozzi and the entire team at the Secretariat, and for all of you for your diligent work on the committee and your efforts to help our province mitigate and adapt to climate change. It is so important, and it's a pleasure to be here. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into our question period. On va commencer avec Monsieur Leblanc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank Mr. Burke. If I may, Jamie, I'll call you Jamie, since we've already had some meetings in the past, in my past endeavors. You know that I was always in touch with your former mayors. I've had a great relationship with them, and we've exchanged a lot of great ideas. And I know that I won't name any mayors, but I can tell you that they've been very exceptional and innovative on what's I see Sackville today, but I see Sackville in the future also. I know that I went to the public forum, I believe it was 2 years ago, and it would have been in early 2020 when we had this public forum in the town hall of Sackville, talking about climate change, adaptation, mitigation, and it was an open forum, and it was a really very good informational session. And I see that you guys been very proactive. My first question, if I may, and I see that this was a lot of priorities that you guys have. What would be your three most major priorities? I know that you have big ticket items, but what are the major priorities and what are the costing? And what can you tell me about the relationship that you're negotiating with either the federal government or the provincial government or with private endeavors like the CN? I know that we cannot lose the major highway, the connectivity between Amherst and Sackville. It's a major connector. I totally agree with you, but I'd like to have an update. You basically went around it, but I'd like to have more, if you could drill down and give us more intel on what's going on.
Yeah. Thanks, Jacques. It's good to see you again. Yeah, so I guess the three main priorities, I guess number one would certainly be Lawrence Street Phase 3. We've been very fortunate, I guess, since we started this Lawrence Street reconstruction work in phases 1 and 2, which have already completed, where we did a major land transaction with CN. So we've had a good working relationship with CN. We bought a building in the industrial park that allowed them to give up some space, and no dollars were kind of exchanged to allow them to move in and move into a new facility and give us land for our now our naturalized stormwater retention pond. So I guess one of the major issues, I guess, with these large projects is we don't always own the land, and the way the infrastructure programs work is that we receive word that the project's been successful, and then the project's announced publicly, and then we're out negotiating with landowners to purchase property. So we're not in a good position to negotiate pricing. The flip side of that, it's always hard to convince people to go out and purchase property, which can be expensive. I mean, for Lawrence Street Phases 1 and 2, we purchased, about $400,000 worth of property. And, to do that proactively, it's hard to convince people that, we're going to get a better bang for our buck if we do it now, rather than wait until the project's announced and funded and we know it's a go. So that's always been one of those catch-22s that we've struggled with. Fortunately, when we did Phase 2, we bought all of the property for Phase 3. So we're no longer in that position. We're good to go. It's now it's a shovel-ready project. We have the money. It's budgeted in 2022. We have positive signals coming from from the bilateral agreement process, and we're hopeful, I guess, that we'll be in a position in later the following winter to undertake construction. So that's certainly one of the big ones for us. And I guess the second one would be our lagoons. That when we undertake these major capital projects, they literally drain us. So we kind of build up the piggy bank for one, and then we transition and turn over to project number 2. And this is a big one. I mean, we're talking north of probably $10 million for a community of 5,300 people and a $12 million budget. Like that's a lot of money. But we've adjusted our utility rates, so it's a different budgeting process, and we're trying to build the chest, I guess, so that when an infrastructure project rolls around, we're ready to put our skin in the game and and meet whatever that funding criteria may be in order to fund the project. So that's another one, I guess, is the financial management. You need to be prudent. You need to be strategic and think long term. Like this isn't like building a new playground. These are large projects. Multi-jurisdictional, provincially significant wetlands, lots of permitting and regulatory processes around that. So that would be number 2. And then I guess number 3 would be, I guess not necessarily a tie, but it's tough to say between the isthmus itself and what that study, the future of that study will look like. Or, I don't know what Wood will recommend as part of the potential solutions, but I can tell you that any one of them will probably have an impact on our community. So that would be one. And then I guess the piggybacking on that would be, there's just so much other stuff in terms of the climate change portfolio. Like, just like rolling out an electric vehicle fleet, like it's expensive. And, we're just budgeting for a new fire truck. And, we know electric fire trucks are available, but instead of $800,000, it's $1.6 million. And, you know, it's that rock and a hard place you find yourself between knowing the technology's there and wanting to do the right thing, but not having the financial resources to make it materialize. That's the frustrating reality, I guess, of some of the things that we face.
Okay, so talk to me maybe a little bit about, have you made applications with FCM? You know that I'm aware what FCM can help. I know they were partners when you guys got involved with the town hall and the fire hall.
Yeah.
So what are they available doing? What is the provincial government able to do, or what are you guys doing with them? And what's the federal government at the present time? Because I know that, you know, there needs to be major projects in the ground for that area in regards of protecting, you know, and mitigating climate change. I mean, it's coming. It's just a matter of time. We have those king tides. We're going to have another snowstorm coming tomorrow night, and you know well as I do, chances are the highway is going to be closed again, and there could be some significant damages to the road with erosion. So, what can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you from a I guess financial contribution perspective, the government, both levels of government, have been very kind to us. I mean, they've funded Lawrence Street Phase 1 and Lawrence Street Phase 2, you know, 5.6 and another, you know, $2.9 million. So we're very grateful for that, and I guess we're hopeful that Phase 3 will follow suit, given the success that we've had with the first two phases. So the province, we've pursued those through the federal provincial infrastructure funding agreements, Build Canada, and now the IBA agreement. So we have an application in the hopper. So I guess for us, we need to be careful not to bite off more than we can chew. So I guess we apply to one, and if we're successful there, we'll take that money and we'll hit the ground running with a shovel in the ground. If we're not, we'll look somewhere else. I guess right now we're hopeful that the IBA agreement will materialize, and we have our own money to make that project happen. In terms of the highway closures, that is certainly an area we could use some assistance on. So I'd say I would strongly encourage this group and to work with DTI to come up with a standard operating procedure on how to close the highway. I totally understand it's multi-jurisdictional. The road just doesn't stop at the New Brunswick border, but there are times out there that you can't see, and what ends up happening is that allowing the traffic to stay on the road puts our first responders in danger. And they're going to answer the call. That's what they do. They're there to serve the public, and that's our concern, is that without some type of managed process to strategically close that and to do that in a strategic way is potentially going to lead to trouble. So that's one area we could certainly have some help on. And then the other is the abattoir that I mentioned. We can do all of the work that we can do to bring the water to the Bay of Fundy, but we don't own the abattoir, so I can't go in and have our public works crew build a new one. We rely on that's provincial infrastructure, so I need the province to commit to building the new infrastructure to allow us to finish that Lawrence Street Phase 3 project.
Okay, well, I'll just leave it at that. I want to thank you, Jamie, for your insight, and I know your dedicated hard work towards the progress of the town of Sackville. Thanks.
Appreciate it, Jacques. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Leblanc. Mr. Kuhn, the floor is now yours. Mr. Kuhn, you're still muted.
Just trying to be consistent and always be unmuted when I start. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Burke. We'll start over. So as you know, we're listening to presenters, to witnesses, particularly focused on recommendations that for renewal of the New Brunswick Climate Action Plan after the first 5 years of experience with it. So clearly one of the areas when you sort of look back at the first 5-year plan that was a bit short on was adaptation, addressing addressing measures to protect the community's infrastructure and households from the consequences of climate change. So I'm wondering whether you could frame some of what you talked about in a way of recommendations for how the plan might be renewed. So if we could start with dikes, maybe. Your slide pointed out that between the dikes inside town and outside town, you've almost got 24 kilometers of dikes and the abattoirs that go with it. So what kind of recommendation or recommendations around maintenance, renewal, of rehabilitation of dikes and abattoirs would you make?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Kuhn. I mean, this is essential, and I think there needs to be some type of priority given to the existing abattoir system, and there needs to be a comprehensive evaluation given to the current state of the dikes. We know that they're in certain areas they're higher than others, and when it comes to sea level rise, that's not going to work. There needs to be a comprehensive review of the overall diking system and to prioritize what areas need work from a top of dike situation, but also from an age and adequacy of the abattoirs that are allowing communities to drain their fresh water. And then there needs the appropriate cost estimates put in place to rehabilitate those assets and funds made available in order to complete the work. And to my knowledge, that's not been done. It's a kind of a piecemeal basis where there's a little bit of work here and a little bit of work there, but there's no overall comprehensive strategy put in place to ensure those dikes are going to be sustainable in the long haul.
Thank you for that. So just to help me here, who would logically take the lead on carrying out that comprehensive assessment or making sure that comprehensive assessment happens and then turning that into a strategy?
Yeah. So the dikes were the responsibility of the Department of Agriculture, and that changed several years ago. So it now falls under the jurisdiction of DTI, so the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. So they would be responsible for undertaking that work, in my understanding.
So you may not know this, but just in case you do, so were the people who were actually involved in the management of the dikes at agriculture, did they move over to DTI? In other words, are there people at DTI who have long experience with the dike systems, or do we know?
Yeah, yes, they have.
Okay,
Yep.
So that's helpful then. That's good. So there's some experience to bring to bear on that. So just to understand that, I mean, you've got two issues in the Sackville area. You've got, I mean, the aerial photographs or the satellite photographs are quite compelling when you look at the peril that the town and surrounding area is in. It's very visual. But can you sort of distinguish, I think it's obvious, pretty obvious, why the Bay of Fundy poses such a threat. We're talking about well, let me ask about that actually. So between sea level rise and storm surges, the Bay of Fundy poses quite a threat, and there maybe was a bit of a glimpse of it with the Groundhog Day gale. Has the town looked at what happened during the Groundhog Day gale so many years ago to Sackville?
Mr. Kuhn, when you say the Groundhog Day event, which do you know specifically which one you're referring to?
Well, that was I think the late 19th century.
So the images that you saw in the presentation today were the 1962 flood, and our hydrographic map that's within our own zoning bylaw, it shows the area that will be covered within Sackville in the event of a breach of the dike, and it's significant. It's 24% of the town.
Yeah.
I mean, and what we found is that even with sea level rise, the land mass that would be covered by water isn't necessarily the issue. It's the depth of the water given the drainage basin in that low area. So the water, almost you can imagine it like a bathtub. So, if you get that 1 in 100 year storm in the perfect conditions with a full moon and a high tide, and a breach of the dikes, there is no question about it. We're in trouble.
Yeah. Okay. So then, can you distinguish between that and the overland flooding issue, which you've got the retainment ponds built for? Where does the overland? I mean, it seems like a silly question, maybe, but
Yeah.
but what are the factors that cause the overland flooding for you?
Sure, and it's not silly at all. We've answered this many times as part of our discussions with residents and our own councillors and our own colleagues. So what ends up happening is that with snow melt and the duration, frequency, and intensity of storms, all of that water falls and it funnels its way down through the community to the lowest part of the drainage basin. And we've known over time with development, we've paved more surfaces, we've pulled down more trees, we built more homes with roofs and hard surfaces, that all of that water is moving much more rapidly as it used to in the past. So what ends up happening is that it overwhelms the system. And by the time it gets to the lowest area, it obviously we're flooded, but it also kind of wreaks havoc along the way where we've had cases in the past where our Bill Johnson Memorial Park is flooded. We used to have a car share program in town. The car share was parked in the park, and the water level increased so quickly. It hit the bottom of the car, triggered the windows to pull down automatically, and the car was written off. So that's what we're trying to manage, is kind of opening up the pipes to allow the water to get there, without being interrupted, and then having a spot like that bathtub to allow the water to fill up. So as it rains and the snow melts and that water is captured, the bathtub fills up. And then when the abattoir opens, when the tide goes out, you can just imagine like opening the plug on your bathtub. That water then starts to drain out to the Bay of Fundy. So we're limited in how often we can get that fresh water back out to sea. That really depends on the tide.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. The other question, I guess, here is, you mentioned the Seknato Isthmus study, and I know it's not out yet, but do you anticipate there will be recommendations in the study that will involve the town directly in some way, or will it all be sort of federal provincial work outside of the towns and communities?
Yeah, I would love to be in a position to say yes. Unfortunately, I can't because I don't know. I'm hopeful that the recommendations will take into consideration our community as well as our neighbors across the isthmus in Amherst, but I don't know that. I mean, we weren't heavily consulted as part of the process, and I know the mandate of the consultant was to look at options, and then those options will dictate what comes next. And I know there'll be further consultation and work that needs to be done. We were very pleased to be able to give them access to our property, be able to go out and do what they need to do for geotechnical analysis and pass over what information we have to make the study more efficient and helpful. But in terms of the specifics of your question, Mr. Kuhn, I can't say whether or not will be Sackville specifically will be included. I'm hopeful, but again, I don't have the answer for that.
Okay, well, we'll have to stay tuned for that. Finally, is the town at all involved in the national adaptation strategy the federal government has initiated in any way? I mean, has the town of Sackville been asked to come in and speak to your particular situation as an example of an area that needs serious attention?
To my knowledge, no, we have not.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kuhn. Your time is coming to a close.
Thank you.
Mr. Austin is not currently with us, so we'll move to the government side, and we'll start with Ms. Bacchus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming today, and what a detailed presentation. Wow. Have you made a similar presentation to UMNB? Have you spoken to that group, and do you know if anybody else is hiring a climate change coordinator?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I know our former mayor and certainly our current mayor are very active in with UMNB. I don't know if we've ever made a specific presentation on kind of Sackville's climate change initiatives or challenges. So I don't have the answer to that, I'm afraid. I don't think we have.
I think if you did, it would certainly encourage other communities to do something similar, to sit up and take notice anyway, and just to see what you've been able to do and what you've carried out already and your plans for the future. So it's just
I'd
a
be
little,
delighted to.
yeah,
I'd be delighted to do that.
yeah. So,
And in terms of the climate change coordinator,
Right.
I know some of the larger municipalities like Fredericton, the city of Moncton, for example, have put those types of resources in place. I don't know of another smaller community like Sackville that's done it. We've been trying to be strategic about it because, staffing's expensive.
Certainly.
Not just salary, but benefits and et cetera. So again, the Environmental Trust Fund has graciously funded that as a pilot project. We made a subsequent application to kind of extend that over a 2-year period. And then we've partnered with EOS EcoEnergy. So EOS is hosting the individual in their office space, and they're kind of co-managed by our senior manager of corporate projects, Ms. Karen Miller, and Amanda Maryland, the executive director at EOS EcoEnergy. So they're kind of getting a bit of a flavor of what the nonprofit sector is doing to help municipalities, but also directly involved at the municipal perspective on what we as a corporation can do to implement climate change mitigation and adaptation measures.
well, thank you. And I really would encourage you to make an inquiry to see if you can make such a presentation to UMNB. And I know myself, I'm in Charlotte County, and I'll certainly be checking with my municipalities to see if they've heard of what your plans are, and if they too have thought of hiring a climate change coordinator. So thank you very much for your presentation. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other members have questions? Members of the government? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Burke. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I'll give you an opportunity to make some closing comments if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to leave on how delighted I am to be here and how important this is. It's a huge endeavor, and we will be following up with a subsequent submission that kind of hones in on the recommendations that we provided towards the end of the report. And I'd like to thank Patrick and his team for allowing this to be so seamless. I know I'd much rather be there in person to shake your hands and talk a little bit more about this as your day goes on, but nonetheless, it's worked seamlessly. So Patrick and his staff, hats off to you for allowing this to go so smoothly. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, and have a great day.